Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. David Gouthro back with an episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. And today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Brandi Heather. Welcome, Brandi.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here, David.
Well, I hope that continues throughout the conversation. I guess we'll have to see.
We'll have to see.
So Brandi, you helping professionals. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a great description.
And
I help people who take care of people.
And we need people to be doing that for sure. And you take a bit of a different approach to it, which I find quite intriguing. So tell the listeners a little bit about how you approach helping helpers.
Thanks. It is a different approach. And I think that the world is full of some pretty standardized approaches to taking care of people who take care of people. And I think it's time for us to look at things a little bit differently, because I'm not sure it's always working. In fact, it's not working. So my approach is really to take a look at how people play. And that sounds like the opposite to what someone might need if they're in a frontline, as a frontline caregiver, as a frontline worker, that play would be the opposite of what they need. But the science of play and playfulness and creativity would actually say that that's exactly what they need, but it's the first thing that they put away when things get serious and they feel overwhelmed and are on the edge of burnout. That when I say, you need to find play, that they believe I'm actually, diminishing what they're feeling or diminishing what they are doing in their everyday lives. And I'm not at all. What I'm saying is that when people actually find their playful self, it's one of the greatest human resources we have for coping and resilience. But it's hard to find because it's full of people think it's unproductive. And
so I guess I have two questions for you, Brandi. And one of them is say a little more about the science of play. Then the second question is going to be around, so how do you get people around the notion that play is frivolous and actually get them engaged in it, because it can actually lead to their recovery? So maybe a little bit first about the science of play, then let's dive into how you actually encourage people to embrace that.
Well, one of the things that we know and is that what I call in play. So when we are being playful, and that to me is described as this question. So I'll send this out to the audience so that they can think about it. But when was the last time you did something so good that you lost track of time? And if you can think of that moment, what was around you? Were you inside or outside? Were you in chaos or quiet? When you can think of that, you start to understand neurobiologically what your brain needs to feel in play. And the science shows us that when we are in that state, we are the most open to listening to others, to hearing others, to sharing our creative ideas, to have the confidence to communicate and connect, that we allow our imagination to take hold, that we find solutions that you can't find in that stressed state. And so the science really does support that if we can come to this place where caring professionals know what play looks like to them, we can also design environments and strategies around what's personal to their play personality.
So I want to zoom in on a term that you used, which was when you were in play. And I'm assuming from that, excuse me, that you can be playing and in play, but you can also be playing and not in play. Is that true? Or am I just sort of imagining that?
What I define as being in play, and again, one of the difficulties is when people think of play, they often think of something, you know, related to children and and to doing frivolous, unproductive things. And so when I say play, there's often an image that comes into people's mind. And I get this very often. You know, I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, I'm an educator, I'm working the front lines. I do not play. But if I say, is there a part of your day where you feel courageous and connected, where you feel like, wow, I could do anything? That to me is in play. So you may not be playing. You actually might be doing one of the hardest parts of your job, but a child reached out to you and said, oh my goodness, I learned something, something happened for me, I found kindness, or any of those moments. We don't have to be playing, but our brain and our body are actually in play. They're listening more, they're in tune more. And so that's the difference for me. People think that playing is a physical action, but it's actually not. It's not what we do. Play is who we are. And discovering that can be the key to coping and resilience and creativity and imagination and all of those pieces. But we have to get our head around the idea, the picture that we have in our head that is play.
And that and overcome that notion that if you're playing, you're just goofing around, when in fact you're doing something that's very important for your health. And I also, I think that when you're playing, you have to be totally in the present. You can't be thinking about something in the past and feeling guilty about it or worrying about the future. At least in the way that I think about play, you're totally in the moment, which I know is an overused phrase, but and mindfulness may or may not fit either. But you're not in the past or the present. You're right here now, and I think people enjoy it, seeing other people that are in play.
Well, we actually know that play, watching someone else play, is contagious. Like it is. When you watch it, it's like if I yawned right now and you would all yawn together. When our mind sees it, it actually is, it makes it very hard not just join in, but to be a part of it in some way, even from the outside. So we know that characteristic of being really mindful in that moment can be present for many. For some, though, and I give this example, I have business friends who would say they don't play, and yet when we walk through their day, there's some very playful aspects to what they do. So, for example, my friend Melanie, she is so hyper organized. Everything is very organized in her world. She's running multiple, fitness and educational classes across North America. But on her wall are like 1,000 sticky notes in all different colors and patterns. And when she gets a new pad of sticky notes, like her eyes light up, her heart races. She is in that moment. And so I think as we start to kind of look at play where we don't have to think about doing it, we sometimes believe we have to add it into our schedule. Like, oh, at 12:05, that's when I'm going to play. But I actually want us to be mindful of what happens right now. And it might not be that you're totally mindful of what happens, but can we be more mindful of that moment that we were so engaged with something, so enraptured by something that we not only lost track of time, but we didn't care what other people thought. We weren't wondering, which Instagram filter I'm going to put on it. And we are present. So I'm asking people to be more present in those moments, not to plan them.
I love that. I love the freedom that comes with that, and also that makes me think of many years ago. I was doing some workshops for a spinoff of IBM, and they were called Fun Without Guilt, because they felt that they should be able to have fun without guilt, and that it was okay if you're being professional and doing your job. people would rather be working with someone who's having fun. So it's a little bit different from play, but the notion was to do it without guilt. And also the realization that what's fun for one person is not for another. And you can't drag someone into your perception or your perspective of what fun is. But I'm wondering how. I have so many questions running through my mind. So one of them is, how did you come to play as something that you wanted to focus on? That was, I don't want to say it's your life's ambition or your career path or anything like that, but a modality where you felt you could really add value to people who are helping people. How'd you discover that?
Well, my story is this. I taught as a college professor for 20 years in Red Deer in Alberta. And I had built a program. My specialization is disability inclusion in sport, recreation, and play. And so I had built a whole diploma program based on adapted physical education. And we were inviting in community, and I developed this incredible weekend programming for families who had children living with disabilities to come, and we'd integrate students, and all this wonderful thing would happen. And then students started to say to me, uh, how much they loved my courses. And that was really nice, but they would say it in a way that they would actually choose my work and my courses over anything else. And that's not a bragging point. It's just that I started to hear it a lot. And I would ask them, what is that? And they would say, I can take chances here. I can take risks. I can be wrong. And it feels like play, not work. And that word play would come like from the families that I was working with, the organizations and the students and the faculty. People would say, oh my goodness, it's because of play. And I thought, oh, I've got to dig into this. And so in 2016, I went back to school and took advanced training in play therapy and started to really understand, oh, the therapeutic process of this is what's making people want to be in it. It makes them feel good. Sometimes they don't even recognize what's happening.
Hmm.
It's just that when they leave that space, they feel better than when they showed up. And that is powerful. And so what I realized was, in order to be really powerful in what I was saying and what I was doing, I needed to keep being the thing that I was being, because it was the underlying reason why people felt trusted and safe and capable and courageous. All of those things were happening because there was play in the background all the time, not even sometimes with intention.
Wow. So I think that's fabulous that you've come to that naturally, right? It just kind of evolved. And, I wonder how important, like you hear terms like psychological safety. I guess what I'm wondering is, how do you get people into a place where they're willing to play? And is it one-on-one? Is it coaching? Do you talk to organizations to say what you need is play? I suspect that's not what you say, but nevertheless, people see
No.
value in what you do, and helping their helpers help people.
Yeah, it's interesting because the foundational outcome that happens after a day with me or a keynote or some coaching with me is really that people feel restored and reconnected to the people that they're working with, re-energized, and that actually helps retain our caring workforce. Right, when they feel that way, they will stay. And one of our greatest challenges right now is, how do we help support people in caring professions to remain in that work and still take care of their physical and mental health? And so that's the outcome that happens through spending a day or having a keynote or doing some coaching. But what I really do is that I don't lead with play. Play is one of the tools that I use, but I distinguish these two things. People often attach silliness, like having to come to a workshop and be silly, which will make more people take a day off than you can imagine, because they don't want to seem or look silly. And nothing that I do in my work asks people to play in any way except their own. So the thing that I say is that if you feel like you have to play, or if you think that I can make you play, that's actually never the case because play is voluntary. So that forced fun environment where everyone's going to do the same thing is is not the way the process works for me. The process works from literally that moment. When was the last time you did something so good you lost track of time? And from that moment, we can start to look at helping people understand their play personality at work, how it works for them, how it is some of their greatest strengths, how people see them. So at the end of the process, people really do feel, you know, yes, at the end of the process, they come out and say, oh my goodness, that was play, right? But they also come in with the hope that they will feel better in their teams, that they'll have some skills for their own self-care and mental health and wellness and collective wellness. So it's almost like coming around, and then in the end people are always like, oh yes, of course it's play, and now I don't have to be scared of it.
So how do you embed that so that it's not just a sheep dip, a single experience that so that people come back into their organization and find ways to play not just once when they're with you, but play on an ongoing basis. Do you have any thoughts or tips on how to do that?
Yeah, when we start to explore play in a way that makes people feel safe and strong and capable, what I ask them to do for for sustainability is that in these sessions we start to see it in other people, and sometimes play is easier to see in other people than it is in ourselves. So the sustainability comes when we encourage people to help others recognize it. So if I have someone that I work with in an organization, in a team, and I see them or hear them, and they are with a client or a patient or a student, and something inside them, because we know that play is visual, you can see it, you can hear it. When that happens for someone on your team, you walk over and say, oh my goodness, did you recognize that in that moment you were in play? That's the first cue for people to understand those are the moments I need to notice. So the sustainability is that it's easier to see it in other people sometimes than it is to see in ourselves. So the sustainability is the ability to see it in others, to see it in our clients, and name it, right? Be able to name it. Oh my goodness, that's when people feel in play. And if we can keep that practice going, and just the noticing, not setting up playful moments, but noticing when it happens naturally in our work, we will see it more often. I align it with, Mel Robbins' process in finding hearts, right? If we start to look for it more often, our brain will actually start to see it. And right now, many of our brains are not seeking out playful moments or seeing what that looks like. So I actually want to change the process of how we see our world. And that's the sustainable part. If you look for it, it's there.
So let's just stick with looking for it for a moment. So there may be some of our listeners out there that figure, I'm not playful, and I wouldn't know it if I see it. What are some, are there any cues that you could pick up on when someone is in play? Just, so that someone hasn't even been thinking about this now, kind of go, oh, that person's in play. Like, sometimes maybe it's on TV or maybe it's in a store or something like that. How do they recognize it? What are some cues?
I often come back to the everyday thing. You go in for a coffee, and the person across the counter is happy to see you. They are serving your coffee, and they've got a smile on their face, and not a fake smile. It's real authentic. That those are some of the things that we see, people being authentic, genuine. And it sounds funny, but when people are smiling and not disingenuous smiling, that's often one of the cues. And you will see it in people's body language. When, like, I always ask people, what's your favorite store to go into? because oftentimes our favorite stores, the places that we want to be and we're drawn to, isn't just because it has great discounts. It's because when you walk inside the door, people are happy to see you. And so one of the things that I ask people to look for in any scenario is what makes you come back. What makes you come back?
Mm-hmm.
And in customer service, we know that. We sometimes know that. But to family gatherings, to classes that we go to, any of those things where at the end of it, we feel a little bit more lit up than we did when we started. And I always come back to children because it's easy to see children in play. In fact, watch them play for 10 minutes, your heart rate will go down, your blood pressure will go down because they are fearless. They're fearless and they invent and imagine outside of anything we can. So I'm not asking us to play like children, but I am asking us to really take a look at what makes us feel. And you said psychologically safe enough to play. Like, what does an organization look like when people feel safe enough to authentically play in the organization?
And when I think of, times when I might have observed this when they're in play, they're also very inviting and allowing others to come into play. It's not like my
Yes.
group and your group in the sense of competition. And I think sometimes we confuse play with games that are competitive and have scoring and things like that. That play is very natural. And yeah, come on, let's keep going.
Well, and I compare it to the people who love charades, for example. Some people love charades. And when someone says in a big group, they're like, we're going to play charades, and everyone, well, part of everyone gets excited. They love it. And you're in the background and you're the person who hates charades and you're trying to find your way away from the party or away from the group activity, or right, you're backing your back against the wall, putting your head down so no one picks you. And then someone drags you to the front and says, it's your turn. That is their play, but they cannot in that moment make you play. In fact, everything in your body will be trying to make you feel safe, which is like escape, avoid, fight and flight. And so I think we really do have to recognize that one person's play is another person's anxiety attack. It really is. And so respect, when you think about all the things that we would like to respect about people in the world and to help them feel like they belong, forcing them into activities that are not their play, but also make them feel excluded and not good enough or smart enough to play. Some of those pieces are the pieces that people have been through, and that's their connection to play. Was someone forced me, tried to force me to do some activity that didn't, it made me feel awful. And so I think we have to be really, really cognizant that play is as personal as your fingerprint. But if we can have that conversation, that what mine looks like and yours looks like, and the strength of that, then when I see it in you and you see it in me, or I come to you, for example, because your play is logic and strategy, then we know in our teams, this is who we go to when we need a big idea to be expanded. Here's where we go when someone's play is to be directional and know exactly who's in the room and what they can do. And here's who we go to as the nurturing person who reminds us why we belong in this organization and why we do what we do. And if we knew that about our team members, it makes an extraordinary difference.
So
The science is true.
So you had used a term earlier. I hope I got this right. Your play profile or play personality or something like that in an organization.
Yeah,
Can you say a little bit more about that? What those might be?
sure. So Dr. Stuart Brown is kind of a pioneer in play research. And he defines it as having 8 play personalities.
Hmm.
And so in your organization, you will have jokers. You will have people that have to move in order to think. That's part of their playful personality. You will have storytellers, the people who love to tell them and hear them. You will have creatives, and that doesn't just mean paper people, people who love to cook and garden and really see the value in that. And those who love to collect things. So many of us are collectors, but we don't, people we work with would never know that, but that's part of our play. And they might even see it in our work. So there's 8 play personalities that when we look at those in our workplace, we start to understand better why people do what they do, because we are biologically driven to play. And people, I believe, think that stops at 7 years old or something, but it doesn't. We're wired to play our whole life. And so, if you have someone at the office that is the joker, and that's their play and their strength, it makes such a difference. And then I have a profile called the shape of play. So we really start to look at people's basic drive and motivation. And it's fun. The activity is fun. And then we get so much out of it in terms of knowing ourselves a little bit better and knowing the people that we work with better. And it drives on play personalities. It drives on our playful nature. It really takes a look at, and I'll give you an example. In the shapes profile, there's a square, and often people who love this square are the logic processing people who, their play is finding something through totally to the end and accomplishing it in a absolutely logistical way. That's part of their play. And when people start to see that that's part of what makes people tick it, what makes them feel motivated, they're also less likely to say things like, oh my God, he or she or they are always trying to put an order to things. And that's exhausting. But if you started to understand, that's actually their strength. And the number of times we come to them for that is probably also, we haven't yet seen that that's their strength. And for every shape, the nurturer, and we are all a little bit of all those shapes, but we start to see people differently when we start to see, that the thing that actually drives them is that organization. And when when they are in a place of chaos all the time and nothing is happening in order, I start to understand, that is why they get out of sorts, or when they have to take extra time, or when they're exhausted at the end of the day because we did something that was the opposite of what their kind of playful nature is and their overall nature, really.
So I don't know this model, but I kind of feel like a squiggle sometimes. Is there a squiggle?
There is a squiggle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you would fit the squiggle perfect. Big ideas, creativity, boundless energy, and lots of, the ideas with no end point, which is also me. So I surround myself with people with square sides so I can make things actually happen.
So we can be friends.
We can be friends.
So, okay, this is time for a little personal therapy for me. So
Yeah.
I tell myself that I don't like playing games. Right. So when my daughter, if we, when we used to go away and rent a cottage, my daughter and my wife would want to play a game, and I'd resist. No, you guys go play. But then, because my head was getting in the way, once I was in it, I had a blast. Right. And the same sort of thing doing puzzles, because I find puzzles very frustrating. The thought of doing a puzzle I find very frustrating. But once I'm into it, it's like it's fun. So, I'm putting these barriers in my own way of having fun. So fix me, Brandi.
Fix me, please. Well, I think the first most important thing, is to admit that you are taking a look at it like that. But some people do naturally need that lead in, that they wouldn't do it naturally, but they know. So I'll give you an example of a board game. So if you everyone pulls out a board game and you're like, you know what? I don't like board games. That's your kind of mental fixed mindset, right? Don't like board games. This is your play, not mine, and I'm not going to do it. But someone convinces you to come in anyways, and then all of a sudden you're having a blast. You will remember having a blast, and it will actually be strong enough to overcome that I don't like board games next time. So whether or not you know it or not, if in that moment of that board game, or the game that you're playing with your kid, you all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's moments of laughter and joy, and I love this part. Your brain remembers that. And as you start to do things that reinforce that all the time. So for example, I don't like going on really long hikes, but once I'm on the hike, I am having fun. So that's where we have to notice. So when you're playing that game that you're like, oh, when I started this, I didn't want to do this. And the puzzle, when I started this, I didn't want to do it. Recognize what you said there. And then when you're in it, recognize, oh, I just have to get over that first initial mindset that I have about this. And the more you do things, and often things that are uncomfortable because they might be new or for whatever reason, the more that we do that, the more our brain remembers, oh, yeah, I remember that when I get to the middle of the puzzle or I put in that last piece, that is the moment I love. So it's recognizing that what we're saying in our head before we do something that we already know is part of our playful nature or personality.
So, what I'm going to do when I go home today, the first thing I'm going to do before taking the dog out or making dinner, I have these little puzzles that I saw at the one of a kind craft show, and and all the pieces they don't look like standard puzzle pieces, but I'm going to do one before dinner.
Do one.
And if if it's taking longer than I thought it should, and it's starting to feel like work, I'm going to have dinner and then come back at it. That'll be my play commitment for the day, and just to try it and engage and be fully engaged in it, not be going, oh, why did I tell Brandi I was going to do this today?
Yeah. Or will Brandi phone me in the morning with an accountability check-in? Did you do that? Because it should never feel like that.
Right.
I told Brandi I was going to play, and therefore, I will do it. Because if it's not play, put it down.
So I don't ask this in all of these interviews, Brandi, but I will in this one. And for our listeners, if there was one or two suggestions you could give to them that would help them, seek out opportunities or just be more playful today, what are one or two easy steps into the world of play that they might take?
Well, the first step is notice. And I know I've said that lots of times today, but I call it don't should on yourself. But, you don't need to say, well, I should play. I heard this thing today, I should play. So if that's part of the statement, you need to turn that around. The statement is, what are playful parts of my life? And you might not even use that word. So one of the tips is, what else would you call it?
Hmm.
So what makes your heart race a little bit? What makes you feel really capable and maybe even laugh? And maybe in a moment where we feel very connected to someone else. So step one is notice those moments, because then you can repeat them. So I tell people to put them in their pocket. And then two is don't should on yourself. You don't need to say, well, someone told me I should play, and therefore it's no different than exercise or eating right. Or if someone says you should do it, it's not internal, it's external. So when you find what that is today, just one thing in your day, when you find one thing today, you're like, and it doesn't matter if it's when I got into bed tonight, the covers felt so good and I picked up my book, that is that feeling. And play doesn't have to be active. It can be quiet and silent and just on your own. And so when you find that moment today, and if you can't find it today, then you have to do it tomorrow. No have to's or shoulds, but if you can notice, then find it again and repeat the process. Because we only need to find it once for our brain to start to recognize, that's what I'm looking for.
Very cool. Well, Brandi, I'm certainly grateful that you were willing to have this conversation with me. And I can't wait until the next time that we are in the same place at the same time to just play together and see what that's like. Just, be in play together.
Be in play. Yes.
And
I look forward to that too.
And so thank you so much for being here today. I have been here with Brandi Heather, and I am David Gouthro with the latest episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.